Hello, I'm Dr. Jeffrey Fidel. In this video, I would like to go over where we find source and where we discover no self and where we discover that we are not separate from this present moment. The discovery is actually something that we cannot get from outside of ourselves. Again, all spiritual teachings point to the present moment and they point to within ourselves. So to find source is not to read a religious book to find what can only be found within you. It is true that books can serve as a guide, and spoken words can serve as a guide to bring us to look into ourselves in this way. But only we can go to source. And source is not something that we'll find within the conceptual realm. Source can only be found within us. Source is always found in this present moment and is always present within us, within this present moment that nothing is separate from. So, to find source starts with leaving the world of conceptual and entering the world of being or experiencing. So the world of being and experiencing is just that, is to just feel existence without the mind labeling existence. In other words, existence is just intrinsic in and of itself. It does not need a conceptual label to it. It exists whether or not the mind is saying that this is existence or this is not existence. Existence really doesn't care about the conceptual narrative. This goes on regardless of what this one says. So to go towards source is to go into the silence of being, the pure experience. And within being, we begin to feel the essence of who we are. We begin to explore ourselves outside of the realm of labels. A lot of these practices, therefore, involve silent meditations where you just feel your essence, feel your being. The one particular place where all source emanates from is the heart. The heart is where source speaks from. The heart is where we learn no self. The heart itself, when we're listening to our heart or our conscience, teaches us that we are one. It teaches us that nothing is separate from this present moment. This is not a religious teaching. The scriptures written 2,500 years ago point towards this very essence that's within us, that speaks from our heart. So there's no religion at all in the spiritual realization or the spiritual enlightenment. Because once one reaches this simple truth that nothing is separate from this present moment, there's no more need for any belief system. It becomes very clear that the self is not separate from this present moment of existence. It makes sense. Scientifically, we are composed of everything that's made in this universe. We are woven into the very fabric of this universe. There is not a point in time that could ever have been where we were separate from this universe. It's just that the intellect has evolved to a point where the existence itself was questioned. And because the intellect wants to know why we're here, it creates the form of self and the form of a universe. Whereas clearly, although separate, like two waves are separate from each other, the waves are always the ocean. So just like humanity is separate from each other, humanity are the waves of the ocean of the universe. There is separate and not separate at the same time. Well, getting back to where we find source within our heart. Anytime that we want to know the absolute truth, we'll find it within us. This is what we all have in common. This is our conscience. This is how we know morally what's right and what's wrong. Does this always listen to that? No, not always. Does this one even know that that one exists? Over time, actually, they can become so separated that the heart is never listened to. So the journey back, or the return to innocence, is really going from the conceptual back to source, returning to where we all are, regardless of what we may think. That's the return to source, the return to present moment, the return to being conscious. So source is not found outside of ourselves. The books point to the heart. How do we listen to source? To listen to source takes a little bit, or I should say a lot of strength, because when one listens to source, one truly has to know that they are listening to their truth, a truth that's found within them. So one must be able to discern the difference between the preconditioned mind talking and the source, which is not of the mind. The source is of the heart. To get us to the area of source first requires us to allow ourselves to bring awareness to the heart region. And that requires feeling this region. So when I say bring awareness to the heart, I mean bring attention to the experience of the heart region in your body, and to feel the tenderness of the heart, or whatever sensation you might experience there. That's the first step, is bringing that awareness inward. The next step after one gets to this area of the heart is the step of listening. And this is when the mind starts to listen to the inner voice that we all have, or our conscience. And when we have full trust that this is indeed the inner voice, then we can begin to learn directly from source. And that's the trust. And what we learn from source is just that. There's one fundamental thing that is learned from source. That life is always now, and nothing and no one is separate from life. And that's the realization, or the spiritual enlightenment. And that's what's known as no self, or the emptiness. which, again, as I spoke of in the prior video, has nothing to do with denial of existence. It's not nihilistic. It's simply stating that what is beyond all concepts. That this present moment that nothing and no one is separate from can never be known conceptually. It's true that even the spoken words are a part of the present moment. And this is why no belief systems can define present moment, because our belief systems are a part of present moment, if you want to call them that. These spoken words are a part of present moment. So it's not like one can know the present moment, because the very ideas of coming up with what this is are a part of what this is, or not separate from what this is. And this is non-dual. So Source speaks from our heart. It's Source that teaches us that nothing is separate from this present moment. And again, in the end, we're left with the concept of awareness, present moment awareness. And this just has to do with, if there were just this present moment that nothing is separate from, including humanity, one could almost imagine humanity before having an intellect. In that state, a human being is just aware and doesn't separate, or the mind doesn't separate itself from the environment. It's just that the human being has a sensory awareness. So what's left in present moment is just that original awareness. Only the intellect creates a separation. The self can never directly see itself. The self only knows that it's here because it's conscious that it is of existence. We could come up with ideas of why we're here, but then we're in conceptual knowledge again. But we are aware that we have an existence, and the we is not separate from this present moment. So what's left in the end of all this is present moment awareness. If this present moment just existed by itself, it would not know of its existence. But because we, and again, when I say we, I mean humanity, human beings, people, because there is awareness within this form of a person, and this awareness is not separate from this present moment of existence, what we're left with is simply present moment awareness or awareness. And in the end, we're left with silence, because this moment just is.